Hello and welcome to Twerk, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing people, the fantastic jobs they do, and the paths that led them to where they are today. I'm here with Kim. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Could you tell the listener what it is you do for a living?
Okay, so I have a very strange combination of titles.
Yes.
I am still a chartered wealth manager.
Yep.
But I'm also a certified financial coach.
Yep.
I call myself a financial psychologist because I'm much more about the emotions around our money and the way in which our brain dictates how we manage it.
Interesting. Okay.
And any combination of all of those things, along with strategy, consultancy, mentoring, combined, because there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all job title when it comes to your money.
So how long have you been doing what you do?
So I started my career in the 80s.
Yeah.
Before social media, before the internet, before all of those things that we now see
so it was
as
fully face to face
pressures. And I started my career in the trust and taxation department of a law firm. So my first career was in law. And as an 18-year-old who came from a working class background, very normal. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't well off. I went to a state school in Great Yarmouth, so my education was real. And all of a sudden I was surrounded by people who were setting up trusts or beneficiaries of trusts.
Yeah.
And my immediate response was, it's all right for them, they've got money. And I appreciate, obviously, now that I had a great big chip on my shoulder because of this,
and was
assumption.
That generational? I think it's a lot.
I think it was just an ignorance.
A societal thing.
No, I didn't know any different. I saw that we didn't have money. The people that I was at school with didn't have money. There was a lot of poverty around us. And then all of a sudden I was working with people who had a lot of money, who were paying, huge levels of taxes or avoiding huge levels of taxes. And beneficiaries who felt entitled, who were then getting perhaps upset. Why did my grandmother not just give me the money? Why do they make me wait until I'm 35 to get it?
Oh, so you almost weren't seeing the nice side of money either then?
I would jump in and not say anything, obviously, because I was very professional and wasn't allowed to say anything. But my thought process immediately jumped to, well, what have you got to worry about? Don't be so ungrateful.
Yeah.
All of these things that I could hear, almost like my mother saying. And I very quickly realised that actually they were trying to work with just a completely different set of expectations. And that with that money also came things that were restrictive. Perhaps they were expected to live their life in a certain way in return for, having that money. Perhaps they were expected to go into the family business or to take over the family farm, when in fact everybody else that I went to school with had a choice. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
You've talked a little bit about your childhood there. So I guess, what were you like? What were you into? How did you go through school? That kind of thing.
Well, I was a typical child of the 70s. So, most ordinary families found it tough in the 70s.
Very much so. Yeah.
We had national strikes. We had 3-day weeks. We had rising interest rates. We had a lot of things that actually, if our teenagers, if our children, if our young parents had to go through all of that now, they would absolutely, think the world was coming to an end.
Yeah.
So although recessions and cost of living crises and that sort of thing are never fun, back in the 70s, I think it was a whole different ball game.
Well, yeah, there was power. It was like that. You didn't have electricity. Didn't have. It was fundamental things.
But there were a couple of not strange things, perhaps unusual things for me. My sister was born completely deaf. Right. So although now I would not want to be deaf, but now it's less of an isolating disability because we've got technology,
Yeah.
because you can communicate through phones, you can communicate. But back then, in the 70s and the early 80s, there was no technology. So she was very, very isolated.
Is she older or younger?
She's 18 months younger than me.
Okay.
So we're quite close together. And she went to a special unit attached to one of the schools locally, but it soon became apparent that she needed to go to a special school, and there weren't any of those around, so she had to go away to boarding school. She only came home in the school holidays. It was too far away to come home for occasional weekends or anything like that, so she could never get a weekend job or anything like that. And so I very quickly started to feel quite envious. If I had to go and work for my money. And my sister would literally write my mum a letter, because it was in the days before, obviously, the internet, saying, "Hi, Mum, how are you? I am fine. Please, will you send me £5? And, back would go the letter with, "Hi there, lovely to hear from you. Here's your £5, which I always took as being incredibly unfair, even though I know, again, it's the logic. Logically, that it's not her fault.
Yeah.
It's not my mum's fault.
Yeah.
My mum would much rather that my sister could go and earn her own £5, because my mum probably didn't have a spare £5 note.
Yeah.
But I was taking it as, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
It's all right for her. And those are things that I'm not particularly proud of.
Yeah.
But in the moment, at the time, your response is very quick.
Yeah.
And then it stays with you, because then every time there was a letter, it would be, another £5. Or every time I had to go and do my paper round in the pouring rain, it would be like, well, Tanya doesn't have to do this.
Talking about the relationship with money, and even that when you were younger, what spurred you to go into a career with finance?
I didn't want to go into a career with finance.
So at school, then, I'm guessing you were really good at maths.
No, and I was okay. No, I got a C in
or O
in
levels,
O-level.
whatever it was.
I got an O-level grade C. I failed maths A-level. I got a U.
Well, she says swallowing, choking on a coffee.
So
wow! Oh my God! There you go.
I wanted.
And did you go on to college or just to start working?
I started work, so
Yep.
I wanted to go and do music.
Ooh.
So I played the viola, not brilliantly, but it was what I did. And I made friends for life through playing in orchestras, the school's orchestra, the county orchestra, all that sort of thing. And I genuinely made friends for life. And in fact, that's where I met my first husband. And so this was a really big part of my friendship circle, my life,
your identity,
everything. And locally, the college in Norwich had a really good 2-year music programme in place of A-levels. I mean, I'm guessing you did music A-level and other performing arts stuff as part of it, but it was instead of doing 3 A-levels, you did the music programme.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends did go and do this music course, and a lot of my orchestra friends, and I wanted to do that because it meant that I got to spend 2 years doing what I enjoyed doing and spending time with people I enjoyed spending time with.
Yeah.
And so when it came to that conversation with my mother over what I was going to do at sixth form, I sort of said, well, of course I want to do music. And she said, absolutely not.
Oh.
And she said, you'll never be good enough to make a living out of classical music.
Right.
And I wasn't really thinking about making a living. I was just thinking about the next 2 years.
Yeah, which is what kids do. Yeah.
But she said, you've got to go and do business studies. She was all about, you've got to do something that's academic.
That was of the time, though, wasn't it?
You've
business.
got to do... The choices back then was still that you could go and do childcare or home economics or something
or
that was...
doctors, teaching. Yeah.
Or you could go in to do business studies.
Yeah.
It wasn't that my mum didn't want me to have ambition. But the societal expectation, this is the 80s.
Yeah.
The societal expectation was still that you got a job, you met somebody, you married, you had children, you gave up work until the youngest was at school, and then you may have gone and got a part-time job somewhere.
Yeah.
And given that I met my first husband when I was 15, and we got engaged when I was 18.
Wow.
So I was already on that path to following the societal norm.
So this is while you were doing business studies?
I was doing my business studies. So
yeah.
I did business studies, A-levels, economics and maths, failed maths, loved law, and suddenly thought, this is the career for me. I can really make a difference. I can, every day is going to be different. And so I literally sat down with the yellow pages and I wrote to every law firm
in the area
and said, I want some summer work. You don't have to pay me. I just need to get my foot in the door.
Brilliant.
And then I managed to get this job within a really big, fabulous law firm in the city and in Norwich, and took it. But it was in a department that, as an 18-year-old, was a bit boring, trusts and taxation. It wasn't the criminal family. And
what were you doing? Sort of like an
whatever.
admin type role?
So I would work on their trust accounts. I would work with their investments. So the stockbrokers would write to me with the advice to invest the money.
Yeah.
And then I would basically rewrite that letter to the trustees saying, this is the advice. Can we have your instructions?
Right.
And so I learned a lot about investments just because I was taking it in and rewriting it.
You were processing it all the time.
And then...
And I'm guessing they trained you up for that, did they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did day release to get my law exams. And...
What?
Yeah.
You just drop that in like that?
So I did day release and evenings and
so
that
the
sort
law
of
exams to do what you were doing at the time?
Yeah. So there is...
so how long did that take?
So, I stayed in that role for probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And it's the Institute for Legal Executives is now it's an incredibly popular way of becoming a fully qualified and very well respected lawyer, and you can either use it as en route to being a fully fledged solicitor, or it's a career path in its own right. But back then it was very few people knew about it. There was a little pocket of change in the legal system, in the legal industry, and a lot of firms, particularly the bigger firms, already had financial departments within them, and they used to sell life insurances and policies to their clients.
Yeah.
And so that had been going on for some time, but they didn't have investors. They didn't have stockbrokers. And what they were doing was the role that I was doing. We were having people externally advise our clients.
Yeah.
I would then, act as the postbox in between.
Yes.
So the Law Society and the legal firms suddenly decided, actually, we could do this ourselves. We could keep all of this in-house. So instead of somebody else making the money from the investing, we can do it ourselves. And we can offer a one-stop shop for our clients.
Yeah.
So they inherit money and we invest it for them.
Yes.
Or they sell their business and we invest the proceeds. Or they receive a personal injury payout and we look after the money for them.
Yeah.
So it made great sense.
Yes.
And so I was really, really lucky that when that happened, there were also other changes within the firm, which meant that jobs were being cut and hours were being lost and that sort of thing. And I just had my first baby. I'd come back to work and found that actually my job as I knew it wasn't there anymore.
It's very common, yeah.
And I was lucky that I was given the option to join this new in-house finance team.
Yeah.
Which I grabbed with both hands because I already had that grounding of investment and taxation and all of the things that went hand in hand. And I did my stockbroking exams. while I had 2 babies. They were 15 months apart.
Wow.
So I did my stockbroking exams, worked all the way through, didn't take maternity leave, because I just sort of knew that this was an opportunity that I couldn't
worked all
pass
the way
by.
through. So
Yeah.
when you had your second, then how?
Yeah, I sort of sat there waiting to, my
So
poor
right
boss.
to the very end.
Yes.
And then once you'd had,
Well, yeah, I only had
was-
time off because I had a section. So as soon as I was allowed back after
so what,
having
we're
a
talking
section,
like 6 weeks or
yeah,
something?
if that.
Whoa.
Because within
I mean,
certainly
it's saying
back
that mat leave
then,
was rubbish back then anyway,
mat
wasn't
leave
it?
wasn't anything like it is
Yeah.
now. But also the expectation, I was now in an environment that was not friendly for women. We're in the
Right.
early to mid 90s.
They didn't care, did they?
Stockbroking for women, it's.
But they were
it was
really-
a bit Wolf of Wall Street at
Yeah.
times.
So how many women were doing what you
Just
were doing?
me. in this area. For the
Wow.
entirety of my career, pretty much, I was.
So you were literally a lone woman.
And that's not unusual within the industry. Out of all of the chartered financial professionals, whether they're planners, advisors, wealth managers, or whatever, 85% are still men. The gender pay gap is nearly 25% in financial services. So a man doing that job, 25% more than a woman doing that job. We've still got this to fight against, and we've still got this to why would you go into that industry in some ways?
Have a shit work-life balance.
And get paid less when you could go and do something else.
And work in a really male environment.
But on the other hand, it's if you can, and there are organisations, businesses that do pay fairly, and I have worked for some of those, and I have, it's very, very imbalanced.
Yeah.
But if you can get into one of those places that treats you well and treats you as an equal and supports you with all of your, whether you are male or female, whether you are same-sex couple or adopting a baby or whatever it may be, if you can get into an organisation that is going to support you with your family dynamic, then it's a fabulous, fabulous career to be in.
Yeah, okay.
Because it is real people.
Yeah.
Real impact.
Probably really dynamic.
Every day is different.
Yeah.
Whatever is happening in the world will have an impact on your work.
Yeah.
So you're always learning.
Yeah.
And so there are so many brilliant things about the industry.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the challenges are such that it still pushes a lot of people out.
So you got the job as a stockbroker or a trainee stockbroker, whatever it is.
And I worked my way through the dealing room. I was a dealer.
And this is in Norwich.
So I worked for initially at that stage I was working for a national firm, but in the Norwich office.
Yes.
So obviously I would pick up the phone and speak to London, head down to London occasionally. But I've always been really blessed that I can, I love Norwich.
Yeah.
I'm Norfolk through and through, and I've been able to have my career here.
Yeah.
So
well, it is the hub of the east of England, really, isn't it? Which is
actually,
covers a big area.
Historically, this used to be the financial. My office at that time was in Old Bank of England Court, the original Bank of England.
Yeah.
We've got a huge banking history and insurance history in Norwich.
So stockbroking, got 2 kids. What then happens with your career?
So my dad died very suddenly 20 years ago. In a couple of weeks, it'll be 20 years ago. And he was 55 and he had a blood clot. So literally he was here 1 minute, running marathons, living life, running around after his grandchildren. He was just fit and healthy. And then he had a blood clot. Completely random. Blood clot, went to his lungs, walked down the stairs one morning, collapsed.
So he didn't even know?
No. And something within me sort of then said, okay, well, you can have my notice then. And I gave my 3 months notice and I worked through that. At the same time, I'm thinking, oh, heck, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got kids to feed, and I've got, what do I do? And I found myself really bizarrely, and I really don't know, because again, the internet wasn't really a thing then. You didn't scroll online with, it was, I suddenly felt the need, weirdly, to do reflexology. I was going to become a reflexologist.
Yeah,
That's the way my
okay.
brain goes.
It's very common after, with kids though. It's that time of your life, isn't it?
I completely went
But that's
down a
fair
different path.
enough.
And 20 years ago, the whole holistic therapies thing was, nobody was doing it
No,
in
it
that way.
wasn't. Yeah.
So I signed up to the local college.
Yeah.
To do a year-long reflexology course.
While you were still working, you signed up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that, but I also knew, logically, I knew that I wasn't going to make the same money doing reflexology that I was doing as a stockbroker. So I was like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
So looking through the newspaper one day, I saw a little advert for hypnotherapy training.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And all of a sudden, it all made sense. And so I, over the course of about a year, I did my hypnotherapy, NLP, EFT, Reiki, reflexology. I did all of these things, and it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, I know, but it was also that healing process for me. And I got a log cabin at the bottom of my garden. I brought clients in. I ended up teaching a lot of things like Indian head massage, confidence
I did not
classes,
see any of this coming, I've got to say.
Lots of things around that. So that's where my coaching and my training sort of
really
career
done
started.
A massive U-turn, haven't you?
So in that time, now a lot of people recognise tapping. A lot of people recognise NLP, but 20 years ago it was like I was weird.
Yeah.
But it felt that I had to do it for whatever reason. I was drawn to it, and I did it, and I ended up teaching it, and I ended up from there. I went to teach in one of the local prisons, men's prison, and I ended up teaching business studies to inmates in a local prison.
So how long did you do that for
I
then?
didn't do that for too long. I think I very quickly realised that actually it wasn't going to fulfil all of the things that I left my stockbroking job for.
Right.
And one day I was sat in the staff room at the prison with the local paper. I think it was about 3 days old, the paper, never were up to date. And there was a job advert in there for a local firm of stockbrokers asking for...
So this is where you were still working in the prison?
At the prison. I was having my coffee break, reading the paper, saw this job advert, and I actually laughed at it. And I said to one of my colleagues, oh, look, I could do that job. And I don't think they realised that I was a stockbroker. And he said, oh, no, don't be so ridiculous. And I said, well, yeah, actually, I could do that job.
So how long had you been out? About 5 years, had you?
3 years.
3 years,
yeah.
okay. Not that long then.
And I drove home. As I was driving home, I was sort of writing my letter in my head. So I immediately got home, typed up my CV, typed up the covering letter, got back in the car, drove to the office, put it through the door before I had chance to change my mind and think otherwise. And I thought, well, that's it. I've done my bit now.
But also you hand-delivered it, which must have been, was that quite...
Yeah, just go and do it.
Because we're now talking of this late...
So 2008.
Yeah, late noughties.
Early 2008, before the crash.
But it's still email and everything. You could still have emailed it or posted it in. But
this is a very traditional firm.
Right.
A letter and a CV was always going to be the way to do it. I'd known this firm. I'd known the people behind it throughout my career. The person at the head of that firm at the time was the person that years previously in that first job when I was doing the legal stuff, he was the stockbroker who would write to me, and then I would interpret his advice and send to the clients.
So he knew of you.
He'd followed my career all the way through. Whenever I passed an exam, I would get a lovely letter from him saying congratulations.
Okay.
So I put my application in, and I got a call the very next day saying, basically about bloody time.
Wow.
And that was it. I suddenly realised that I needed to be back in.
Yeah, we took a bit of a break, didn't you?
So that was 2008. I went back in. The financial crash happened later that year, 2008. 2000. So it's like, what a time to go back.
Yeah.
My marriage came to an end shortly afterwards, 2009,
Again, often
2010.
linked with financial,
and that was. I then remained back in that role, but because I'd got that holistic, I'd got that coaching, I'd got that that real more of an understanding of people's behaviours and ways of thinking and whatever. The stuff that I'd started, the observations and the understandings and the conversations that I'd had in those really early years.
Yeah.
And my own mistakes and whatever
Your own
along
journey,
the way.
yeah.
And then coming back into it, having taken that break and going back into it. And
You suddenly came back with a completely fresh approach.
Yeah,
then.
and so my marriage came to an end. I then had to make my own, way.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of that stuff brought me to where I am now, really.
You can't just say that. We're still going to talk about how you got here, though, because where we currently are in the timeline is
So
you're working
40,
for somebody else. Yeah, you're 40, you're working for somebody else. How long were you there for?
So I stayed there for about 10 years at that particular firm.
And did you progress up or?
No, I was often, and this is not to say anything against the firm or the people in it, but again, it's I was often a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
And maybe I allowed myself to be that square peg in that round hole. So maybe some of my own insecurities and my own barriers and all of those sort of things, along with their own barriers and whatever, meant that I was never going to be where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Even though quite possibly I could have been. But I always felt that I didn't quite fit, although they did absolutely cared.
Yeah.
And then I was headhunted.
Right.
And I originally turned them down because I felt such loyalty to the people that had supported me through that really important time. I could not have left them. But then, times change, things move on, and they came back again a few years later and said, come and work for us.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the same excuses. The children had left home.
Yeah.
It was me and Phil.
Yeah,
we were in a different place. It's like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I left. And although I was only with the bank for 4 years.
You say only. Kids are only in jobs for 6 months now.
I know. But it was absolutely a great place to be.
Yeah.
I was very much a part of a team. There was career progression that was based on your desire to progress and not just whether you were the right person, whether you knew the right people. That's what I meant. There were lots of opportunities there. I had a great time, great people, great clients. But again, in lockdown, everything changed.
Yeah. So you were at the bank until lockdown, and then obviously in the early days.
During lockdown, the whole setup of the people that I worked with changed, and I was, instead of working locally, I was then working for a national team, which was great during lockdown.
Well, they all restructured, didn't they?
When it was time to go back to normality, I was the only one who wasn't in either London, Birmingham or Glasgow. I knew that it wasn't going to be the environment, and I thought, if I've got to work on my own, I might as well work on my own.
Yeah.
And so I did. I plucked up the courage, obviously sat and had that conversation with Phil.
Yeah.
And handed my notice in.
Okay, so what was the plan then? Or what was your bit? So it is what it is now, or was it slightly different then? Or?
The focus at the original focus at the time was not to advise.
Right.
That's for somebody else now to do.
Yeah, okay.
So I am still a chartered wealth manager.
Yeah, okay.
And I will help people with their strategy. Absolutely. And I would do all of the things up to the line.
Yeah.
But I want to be there for all of the conversations that they don't have with their wealth manager.
Right.
The ones that they're afraid to have. I want to have the more honest conversations before they press the button to invest.
Okay. And then do you then refer people on?
If they need referral, they get referral, and I will match them up with the right person.
You figure out with your really unique style what it is people need to do with their money.
And then sometimes you can do that yourself. If you can do that yourself, I will happily guide you through it.
Yeah.
I will show you what the pitfalls are, what the risks are, what to look out for so that you don't get scammed, all of that sort of stuff. So if you can do it yourself, if you want to do it yourself, absolutely I'm there for you.
Yeah.
If you need that specialist support, then I will get my little black book out or my LinkedIn network, and I will then say, this is the person that I believe is the right person to speak to. And I do the introduction. And I don't take any kickback. There's nothing in it for me other than knowing that I've put the right person in front of the right person.
Wow.
So...
And was that always that
was
sort of
always
model?
my plan.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I wanted to be able to help at a different level.
Yeah.
At what I see to be the most important level, and then they just finish the job off.
Yeah.
So that's the way that it started, almost exclusively for women, because the gaps for women are still huge.
Okay, so where does this go for you now then? Do you have a 5-year plan? Or do you just want to grow it very naturally and very organically, or just not even grow it, but just to go with it very naturally?
I can't pretend that I don't want to grow it.
Yeah.
You know, I think the reality is that there is a huge amount of impact. I spent the first, so I'm now in year 4 of my business. I have done that sort of like, everybody needs me, and everybody comes up and says, they don't teach this in schools. But, you need to get into schools. It's like, yes, I'll go into schools, but of course schools don't pay. We need you here, we need you there.
Yeah. You should do this. You should do that.
And it's like I've tried to hit every element of it, because it's like, yes, this is so important.
There's almost so much to do.
Yeah. And then towards the end of last year, Phil and I had one of those, life evaluations of our own. We sold our house, we downsized, we moved to the country, we, just me, Phil, the dogs, wearing our welly boots and, whatever. And as part of that ability to give yourself space, headspace and all of that sort of stuff, came the question, what do you really want to do? And the answer is, I really want to help those people who were like me, who were caught in that trap of what people expect, what you expect of yourself, the reality of that, the emotion that's attached to it, the mistakes that then come along with it, the loss of your identity, the emotions when you get it wrong, the chips on your shoulder that you realise are, need to be banished.
Yeah. But how do you grow that, though? Because that's just you, isn't it?
But it's not just me. The fact is that now I have conversations like this that say I'm not I hid from all of my financial things.
I didn't mean, you're the only one doing it. So how are you going to grow it?
So yeah, but it is making that impact and having, say, conversations like this that reach people.
Okay.
That I do speak a lot.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to say for
so it's growing your audience and awareness.
If you can have one conversation at a conference where there's 300 people there, if those 300 people also happen to be in the financial services industry, you are helping them, but you are also helping their clients.
Yeah, okay.
If you go and speak to a group of young professionals who are just starting out to make the same mistakes that you might have made, you can say, you might think, when you're in your early 20s, as you've just got your first law, qualification or whatever, that you've got it made.
Yeah.
But now is the time for you to be thinking about your future, because before you know it, you'll be my age and you'll be thinking about, have I paid enough into my pension, or did I ever get round to saving anything or whatever? So by standing up and saying, this is what I did, this is where I made mistakes, but this is how you can do things differently.
Yeah.
To a room of people,
not
all of them are going to take notice of you, but some of them are going to go away and actually do something differently.
Okay, I've got to ask my 3 final questions because you have a life.
And they'll probably kick us out
of
here before long.
And they'll kick us out, yeah. So question 1 is always, and I think you've almost probably answered this in lots of different ways already, is there any life advice that you would give your younger self? Can be any version of your younger self. What do you think she needed to know?
Don't rush.
Okay.
Just because you are 15, 18, 21, whatever, you don't know it all.
Yeah.
You have got time.
So don't rush decisions, basically.
Don't rush decisions.
Yeah.
Don't think that just because somebody else has got it, you've got to have it.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in other people's stuff.
Yeah.
Just pause.
Yeah.
take your time and, you know, do what is right. Embrace the mistakes because they will happen.
Yeah.
And also remember that nothing has to be permanent.
Yeah.
You know, I am a great believer in marriage, and I am a great believer in taking these things seriously. But if you are unhappy, life's too short for you and your partner and your children to be unhappy. And my first husband and I, we were married for 20 years.
Yeah.
But we were probably unhappy for 19 of those.
I know.
And actually, we both should have made the decision much, much earlier. We probably shouldn't have even got married in the first place, but we both should have made the decision much sooner.
In which case, then, maybe that'll be linked to question 2, which is, what would your older self say to you now? So 75-year-old you, what would she say to you now?
Good for you.
Comes up a lot, actually, from women, that does.
Yeah. She would say, I'm glad you did it.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Basically, yeah.
She's proud of you.
She absolutely is. And yeah, good, good.
Well
good
done.
For you.
Well done.
Yeah.
Okay, then the final question is always just, I feel like you're going to have loads of great ones, so how you'd pick one, but it didn't have to be one. Just some life advice, mantras or whatever it is, or that you live and die by, that you just want to share to the world, which could be very similar to what you've just said. It doesn't have to be something different.
Never too early to start, never too late to start.
Okay, yeah.
One of the biggest things that I hear from women in particular, but actually from men as well, is that they feel they've left it too late to make a difference with their finances. I had to give my pension away in my divorce to my ex-husband because he had no pension and I had one.
Yeah.
So as part of our divorce settlement, the judge ruled that my pension had to go in its entirety to him.
Right.
So in my 40s, I suddenly found that I had no pension.
Yeah.
I had two options. I either sat there and got upset about it, or I started rebuilding it.
Yeah.
So anybody who comes to me in their 40s or the 50s or whatever and says that they've left it too late, it's like, well, it's only too late if you're planning on dying tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you think you've got another 30 years of life ahead of you, why would you not start today? If you were 25 and somebody said, you've got a condition that means that sadly you're not going to live beyond 55, would you give up? Or would you say, I'm going to make absolutely the best of these opportunities until, the day I pop off?
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that my children have everything that they need after that.
Yeah. I like
so
that.
Why
Never
is it
too early, never too late.
Why would it be any different at 55 if you think you might live till 85?
Which most people do now.
Get on with it.
Great. Brilliant advice.
Thank you.
I'm going to say thank you very much, Kim.
Very, very welcome. Thank you for indulging me.
In this amazingly soundproofed room.
Yes.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and or this role, then please go to our website www.twerk.org. The link is in this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.